Hi, Rob B here with Rob D, and you are listening to the Property Podcast. Now, many of you will be on your property journey, but wouldn't it be great to hear from a property expert who's finished their property journey, who's been able to retire, but tell you what they would do differently if they started again? In this week's episode, we're in the fortunate position that we can bring you all that experience.
Welcome to the Property Podcast, where every Thursday investors come to be informed and inspired. A couple of weeks back, we had Mark Morris on the show, and it was one of the most popular episodes we've done in a long time. It was so popular, in fact, we got Mark back again, and he's got even more knowledge to share. So this is an episode you will not want to miss.
Rob, quite a shocking headline for this week's news story. And shock is actually in the headline. It says, shock as 500,000 rental homes have been lost to Airbnb and others. That is shocking. Say it ain't so, Rob.
Would you be shocked, Rob, if I told you that headline wasn't entirely representative of the story? Another shock. Yes, the headline here is shock as 500,000 rental homes are lost. The rental homes aren't lost to the lettings market. This is actually saying they might be. So that's massively inaccurate to start with. And then this is based on a survey by Arla, who surveyed their members and asked how many of them would consider switching to short-term lets to avoid lots of the regulations that have come in and things like the tax changes and all that kind of thing. They found that 1 in 10 of the landlords they surveyed is likely to consider a switch to short-term letting instead of normal longer-term lets. But that clearly didn't make a shocking enough headline. So they also included those who said they were fairly likely to consider it, then took those small number of people they asked, multiplied by the number of landlords in the UK, and lo and behold, you end up with a figure of 470,000, which is nearly 500,000, and you can say that nearly 500,000 will be lost. But clearly they won't, because being fairly likely to consider doing something is very different from actually doing it, especially when you actually do look into it and you find out that there isn't demand in that particular area, or you can't do it because it's an apartment, or you can't do it because there are very few mortgages around for this type of thing. I'm not saying that holiday lets aren't appealing, and I'm not saying that more people won't start doing it. They probably will. But I had to pick this one out because it's an absolute prime example of a nonsense headline, which we like to highlight because if you pay too much attention to what you read, you can easily be led into making the wrong decisions or coming to the wrong conclusions. And also, pulling apart stuff like this is quite fun as well. A few weeks back, we had Mark Morris on the podcast as a very special guest, and we heard his conversation with Rob B about his journey in property over nearly 2 decades that led to him eventually reaching his goals. And for me, the most interesting part of that was hearing about what happened after he hit those goals and the unexpected changes that it made in his life. If you haven't listened to that episode yet, I strongly recommend you go back and do so. It's one of my favourite episodes of the podcast we've ever done. And I can say that because I wasn't part of it.
And I paid you £5 to say it.
That helps as well. But while Rob did a wonderful job, what people really related to in that episode was the wisdom that Mark was sharing from all the experiences, good and bad, that he's had in property. But luckily, we don't have to leave it there because the conversation continued. Rob went on to talk to Mark about some of the mistakes he'd made, some of the things he changed his mind on, and ultimately what he'd do if he got to start all over again.
So Mark, if someone was starting out, or you were starting out again, there's lots of things you could do and there's lots of advice you could give, but if you had to give one piece of advice, what would it be?
I'd say goal setting. Goal setting's really key. I did used to have goals, but I never really, on a year-to-year basis, I never had short-term goals and long-term goals. I never wrote them down, and I think goal setting is really key. And I think it's worth spending time and really understanding how you should set goals and review them, because I think, again, that'll increase your delivery. I think at the end of the end of the year or the end of your long-term goals, you'll really see that you've really increased sort of your level of investing, or you've successfully done what you wanted to achieve. And I think the other one as well is forming good habits. That there's a great book called Getting Things Done by David Allen that I think I've read about 4 or 5 times, and it is really good to start forming good habits, because once you've formed it, you're just going to keep doing it, doing little things every day in the business and trying not to lose focus.
So Mark, when we went through on the previous podcast of your journey, something that came out as a theme for me was the pain. The pain, how you pivoted every time you hit a pain point, whether it was learning that you'd not been using leverage and you could have moved things along a lot faster, a market, a change or condition or crash. Every pain point, in a way, actually moved you on further. And what I'm keen to do is get those painful experiences from you so others don't have to do it, because you've been on a great journey. But as you've said to me before, it's because you've learned through the mistakes, and you've made, by your own admission, a lot of them.
Yeah, I definitely have.
So let's learn from those mistakes.
Yeah.
And I've made a lot as well, and that's how I'm able to podcast every week. But your mistakes, I'm keen to have a break from mine for a change. What would you say are the key lessons or the things that you would do differently? I'm really open to where you want to go with this.
Okay, so I think it all strives from education. I just wish I'd educated myself so much earlier, and I'd just really encourage anybody who's starting out or, halfway down the line, whatever, just really, even if you have to take a little bit of time out, spend some time educating yourself. I know people say, and I always hear on your podcast, and it's so right, you only learn through experience, but knowing what I know now, I'm a firm believer that there's a lot of fundamental stuff that you should do before you even start thinking about property. And a lot of that is not necessarily even property related. I would encourage people to spend, whether it's 3-6 months, however much time you've got, and just learning things like interest rates, inflation. I think the other one is financial metrics as well. Although I understood net and gross yield, I never really got to grips with things like return on investment and, return on cash invested, etc., etc. And I think when the penny drops with that, I think that will drive how you want to play out your strategy. Obviously, you need to know your reason why and etc. and all that stuff. But that was a big game changer for me, return on investment, because I used to be just building up a pot of money and investing. And I also, just as an example, I used to invest in ISAs, and I'd built up a reasonable pot in ISAs. And I remember when the return on investment metric, the penny really dropped, I suddenly realised, well, hang on, I think I'm being really clever here with ISAs that are maybe returning 1.5%, and okay, it's tax free, but yeah, big deal. Using leverage mortgages, I used that pot. I think I bought 2 or 3 properties, and within the sort of return on investment went from sort of 1.5% to over 30%. And you just think, that was, again, it's all down to education, because I didn't really understand. My psyche was, not having debt, being lowly leveraged. But when you start understanding, when you get educated, you realise that we should be comfortable with good debt. It's just bad debt that you don't want.
So education, that's something that people must do by your recommendation, and obviously it's one I endorse as well. So what else would you say that your key lessons that you've learned over the time of building this portfolio?
Yeah, so continuing personal development.
What is that for you?
So listening to podcasts, listening to the property podcast, listening to the magazines. I do a lot of listening to Audible.
Stuff away from property as well?
Yeah, definitely. Quite a lot of just general mindset thing, just positive mental attitude. A lot of the stuff that you don't get taught in schools, which is so key. Currently listening on Audible to one of your recommendations, How to Be Like Walt.
Yeah, I love that one.
Yeah, it's a great book. So, yeah, continuing personal development. Slightly going back to the education, I always think that the fundamentals are good, and then I call it kind of the technical learning is the key. Is when you start taking action. So I kind of see it as fundamentals, then learn technical on the job, and then just carry on with your personal development. Just have it because I think the beauty about personal development, it's up to you really, isn't it? It's not like going to school. You can put a podcast on in your car while you're at the gym. It's a great, again, leverage of time. So yeah, I'm really, really keen on sort of personal development, understand things like the 18-year property cycle. I wish I'd have really got to grips with things like that, because that again was quite a big game changer for me. And I think when you understand things like the 18-year property cycle, you can actually start investing with a lot more comfort, and you feel it's a lot. When I started understanding the 18-year property cycle, I always felt as though I was investing risk-free, because the upside was, I knew what the upside was, and as long as I understood the property cycle, I knew the downside would be as long as it was managed, would be quite low. So I think that gives you a huge amount of confidence. I think that's why I was buying properties a lot quicker, because I was comfortable in what I was doing. Going back to leverage, not just leverage in terms of finance, but leverage in terms of don't exchange time for money. Whereas I did in terms of a freelance role, but then I used that money to invest. So whilst I was exchanging time for money, I was also investing in my spare time. I mean, the beauty about property is there will be other vehicles, but it's just such a great vehicle to enable you to invest part-time. I mean, I don't know many, there's not a huge amount where you don't have to give up your job. You can invest part-time. I mean, it's hard. I mean, at times I could have, cried because there's too much going on, but that was because, again, probably trying to take too much on. But I think it's a very forgiving business as well, because I think you can make a lot of mistakes, but you can still come out doing really well. So, very forgiving business.
What other lessons would you give to your younger self?
So I think delegation. Don't manage your own properties if you can help it. I was just really looking at the bottom line, not seeing the bigger picture. My life became so much easier when I started putting my properties into a property manager. I had to go through a couple of bad ones, but that has just been another big game changer for me. Outsourcing things that you don't enjoy doing. Karen, my wife, does the books. She does a far better job than what I do. I used to do my own tax returns, just get a good accountant, and just take a lot of the stress off so you can be doing, the high value tasks. So, I mean, I know you talk about all this stuff on the podcast, and I always hear myself going, God, so true, so true. Wish I'd have done that a lot earlier. The leverage thing as well is that I heard two quotes, and I really sort of resonate with them. You can't build wealth without leverage. I'm sure you've heard that one. But also you can't save yourself to wealth. And I think that's a really key one. Ensure that your money's always working for you. Don't have it sat in a bank account earning 1%. I'm keen that money is being, even at the moment while I'm saving a pot, I'm actually lending it out and getting a return, peer-to-peer lending. It's always have your money sort of working for you. Don't have it sat around earning 1% when the inflation rate's 2%. You're actually making yourself poorer. So
definitely. I mean, that's a big one for me, is people often will look to cut costs, save more, but you can only cut and save so much, whereas cutting to the bottom, there's a limit, is the bottom, but investing for the up, it's unlimited. There's no limit. You can keep growing and growing and growing, and it's having a cutting, saving, mindset, or a growth mindset in a way when it comes to finance.
Going back to valuing your time, where you actually work out your cost per hour, not just what you maybe as you're getting a job, but what you're earning, and really understand what your cost per hour is. Because I think once you actually do those figures, then it becomes a lot easier to outsource things, to try and save myself £20. I used to go in to try and do little electrician jobs, and I mean, I'm absolutely hopeless at DIY. I mean, that actually came to a head when I actually electrocuted myself once when I was trying to change a tenant's...
You really did learn through pain.
Yes, and it hurt as well, literally. So yeah, I electrocuted myself, and I realised then that I needed to, start outsource. So I really don't do anything now in terms of maintenance built up. I mean, my property managers have maintenance guys, but I also have my own that I can call on if required. I think the other lesson is getting systemised and organised, because I think a lot of people, I mean, certainly in the early days for myself, because I viewed it as a spare time role, I don't know whether I really honestly treated it as a business. And I think you need to really view it as a business. Get your accounts up to date, ensure that you're checking your management statements. I mean, I'm quite, I won't say micromanagement, the management age, but I'm really keen. There's so many issues I've seen where I've spotted duplicate and they're not intentional. They're just, checking management, making sure you understand what should be coming and what should be going out. Ensure that you're organised, that you document what you do, so if somebody else could pick it up. I mean, I documented quite a few things, so Karen could pick those up. Or not only that, if you're only doing it once every 2 years, don't do it and then come 2 years later and think, I can't remember what, just document. It doesn't take long. Get yourself systemised, get everything online in Dropbox, Google Docs. I mean, that was a big key for me. Being able to send any information, whether it be EPCs, gas safety, electrical, to enable me to do that on my phone, because everything was, scanned. It just makes life so much easier because you can do it on the go, rather than in the early days you say, when I get home from work, I'll do that. And then you get home from work and you think, got to do this, got to do that, do that. So yeah, being more kind of organised, just really understanding your monthly incoming and outgoings. And as I say, if you can systemize, I mean, a lot of my properties have kind of gas maintenance contracts, because it's just so much cost effective. If the boiler goes, all right, it's managed by a company, but I know that it can get sorted out of hours. Just little hacks, tweaks that, again, your podcast is brilliant to learn. I think you've done a couple of podcasts on hacks and tweaks and systemization. But yeah, I'm a big on things like that. Just try and make your life a bit easier. I think one thing, there's a couple of things. Delayed gratification. That was definitely something I did employ. So in the early days when I started making some cash flow, I just used to reinvest. You kind of think, I'm getting this extra income in, and maybe I can buy a flash car or, consumables that are not going to increase in value. And I think it's really key that in those early years that you do show a bit of delayed gratification, reinvest, because I'm a big believer in the compound effect. Once that, I think, again, you talk about on the podcast, that snowball starts rolling and it does start getting bigger. You realise that it's happening, and you don't, later on down the line, you don't actually have to do that. It just happens anyway. And I think you really realise that if you do that early enough, you're so much later, you're so much thankful that you did reinvest. But it's hard, because at the beginning you think, why am I doing this? I don't seem to actually be getting anywhere, because you just think, I'm just reinvesting. But then you will get to the point where you think, crikey, I'm getting some serious income from this. So
that's a really good one.
Fundamentals as well, understanding what good fundamentals are. In the early days, if it cash flowed, I was just buying it. I wasn't thinking about, are the transport links good here? Are they near shops, schools? Do you know what I mean? That never really came into my consideration. So I think research, fundamentals, I think that's really, really key, which, again, you talk a lot about, which is so true.
I really, really enjoyed my conversation with Mark. He's such a great guy, first and foremost. And I think it's really important to say that. He's so genuine. He's so generous with his time and his knowledge. And he's offered to produce even more content for the Property Hub magazine and other podcasts in the future. And we'll absolutely have him back. But I think, Rob, what's kind of pleasing, might not be pleasing for Mark, but kind of pleasing is the things we talk about all the time on the podcast have absolutely been played out here in Mark's experiences, is that you learn from the doing. You absolutely get that experience as a property investor by taking action. And this podcast is fantastic because we can learn from Mark's action and we can learn from Mark's mistakes. But people will make their own mistakes as well. But that shouldn't be the end of it for them. They shouldn't give up on property if that happens, because they can see from Mark that, they're bumps in the road rather than roadblocks to stop moving forward.
Yeah, 10 years ago, he made some really big mistakes. And did that destroy him? No, because a decade later, he's been able to retire. Maybe he'd have got there a bit sooner had he not made those mistakes, but they certainly weren't the disaster that he probably thought they were at the time. But what I really love about Mark's story is not to take anything away from what he's done, but he's not done anything that novel or amazing. He's not invented a whole new way of investing in property. He's just found something that works and kept doing it. And that's what's so amazing. If you pick a model that works and you just keep on sticking at it, then you'll get to where you want to be. And also, Rob, he's paired knowledge and action so perfectly. Clearly, there are so many points at which he's learned something new and incorporated them into what he's doing. And the knowledge has helped, but it's the action that's got him to where he is now.
So it's a simple formula that Mark's used, and it's one that we can all use. It's educate yourself, take action on that education, and then learn and correct from the mistakes that you make, because you are going to make them. It doesn't matter how much you do on the education part up front. Absolutely, that'll help you minimize some of your mistakes, but you are going to make them. So get educated, take action, and then learn from the mistakes. Course correct, and go again. And you will ultimately, just like Mark has, hit all your goals.
Well, Mark has clearly been hugely successful. We'd love to hear your success stories as well. There are so many ways of letting us know what you've been up to, what you've achieved. We're on all the socials as Property Hub UK. You can let us know on the forum. You can send us an email. It doesn't matter. We just love to hear what you've been up to, big or small. And this week we need to say well done to John, who actually emailed a member of our team to thank them for a conversation that they'd had. And in doing that, he said, I've just turned my place in London into my first property investment and released $220,000 to start on other projects. So I've managed to keep my London place and still access funds. I've managed to secure tenants in only 2 viewings who offered to pay full price, and the new mortgage I have is less than the one I was paying previously. Well done, John. That is a brilliant position to be in. And great to hear that you took advice and didn't just give up when you thought something was impossible. In this case, it was from one of our team, but whoever it's from, it's always worth checking with an expert before you decide that something can't be done. Because as you've heard, John managed to find a solution and end up in a really great place because of it. So we've packed a lot into this episode, but before we wrap, we've just got time for Hub Extra. It's that part of the show where we give you a resource, a tool, something to think about, that little bit extra to take you into the end of your week. And it's all backed up with the Hub Extra email that hits the inboxes of Property Hub members every Friday morning. We've already had a lot of wisdom in this episode, Rob, but I believe you found a little bit more in the form of a quote.
Yeah, this quote fits perfectly for what Mark has talked about today and the things we've learned from him. And this quote is from C.S. Lewis, and it is, experience, that most brutal of teachers, but you learn, my God, do you learn? And hopefully you do learn. That's the most important thing, is we all have experience in life, in property and other areas, but do we learn from it? If you make the same mistake again or multiple times, then that's not great, and some people could even accuse you of being a bit silly or stupid. But if you do make mistakes, which we all will do in life, and we all will do as property investors, you need to learn from them. What are you going to do differently? How can you reflect on what's played out? Whether it's a bad purchase, a bad tenant, a bad partnership with a letting agent or mortgage broker, whatever it might be, you can look to blame others for all the things that go wrong, but don't. Take ownership. Look at how you can course correct, what you can learn from a bad experience, a costly experience, and what you're going to do differently moving forward. Mistakes will happen, but it's the reflection of those mistakes that will really help you make a difference in the future.
Well, that is us done for another week. Thank you again to Mark, and thank you to you for listening. We'd love to hear what you thought of today's episode. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram at Property Hub UK. And remember to check out our channel on YouTube for even more content. So that should keep you busy until Tuesday, when we'll be back with Ask Rob and Rob. So we'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.